All right, Clint from the doorway too, hanging out with Alexander and Gwen from Fleshvessel. It's not the easiest band name to say. I want to just let you know, uh, but I really do want to say thank you very much for doing this. If your other member Troll comes in, hey, it's cool. We'll talk to him when that happens as well too. But what I'd like to really do is say thank you for doing this. It's really a pleasure. Your record kind of blew me away because I love avant-garde extreme music, and when I heard it, you made me very happy. Uh, what I'd kind of like to do is, why don't you two introduce yourselves and kind of say what you do in the band, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, definitely. My name is Alex Torres. I play guitar, viola, Puerto Rican quattro, and just sort of any kind of miscellaneous thing I can kind of get my hands on. But Sakta and I, who unfortunately couldn't join us, are also kind of like the two, I guess, main composers. We kind of do the main arranging. Everybody kind of writes a lot of their own parts as far as how the writing works. And we can probably get into that later, but yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Gwyn. There it goes. I'm Gwyn. I play flute, ocarina, wooden flute, and a bunch of other woodwinds in the band.
Cool. So the first question I'm going to have is, here we go. I'm going to hit you with the big questions early on, and then the simple questions will come from there. So I love that there's like elements of like ethno music in it, jazz. I hear like ragtime stuff at times in it as well too. Mixed with prog, and then kind of the classical vibes at moments, all mixed in with kind of, I'm going to call it avant-garde death metal. I don't know the best way to say it, but how did this all come together with like, there are literally, if I take my time and listen to it, sometimes I hear 8 or 9 different musical styles in one song. So.
Well, yeah, I kind of started the project back in like 2019 after graduating college. Gwyn and Troll, we all went to the same college, Columbia College, Chicago. Sakta actually transferred out after his freshman year. And Gwyn, I think you said you didn't get there until your junior year, right? Because I think that's when I remember meeting you first. And yeah, so it was after we had graduated, and I kind of wanted to start a project. And I didn't really initially kind of have the concept of doing like an avant-garde project. When I started recording for it, I kind of just wanted to do like more of a straightforward, maybe like death black metal sort of thing. But then, you know, as like the Bile of Man Reborn EP kind of started being written, it started kind of evolving into this more weird thing. And I was like, man, it would be cool to kind of use a lot of the stuff that we learned like in composition class and stuff at school and kind of involve a lot of those aspects, because we studied a lot of like 20th century new music stuff, and like and some jazz stuff as well, like depending on probably what professor you got. But yeah, so it kind of just evolved into this weird little project and snowballed from there, I guess.
Cool. Gwen, you got anything you want to add to that, or?
Not really. Alex covered like 99% of it. I think part of what I like most about our music is that there's a lot of different influences in it. Like, I take my influences apart from metal, from jazz and the classical orchestral style, because that's how I learned flute.
Cool. No, that's awesome. So I'm going to talk about some of the bands that I hear elements of, and you can tell me if I'm crazy, if they're actually there, if it's just something that I'm here. Because with this kind of music, of course, everybody's going to hear something different, because it's not the run-of-the-mill kind of band. Like, your songs are 10 plus minutes long, and they're layered, and they're not just here's chorus, verse, chorus kind of situations going on. But from what I hear, and then we'll talk about like my favorite song later on, but I'm just going to talk about like the band in general. And I've only heard the record, so I haven't heard anything earlier than the actual record. But I hear bands like, ironically, the shirt that you're wearing, Atheist. I hear a lot of Atheist, especially in the bass. There's a lot of Atheist kind of vibes, right? But again, Pestilence. Another band that I hear that I didn't see talked about much, but I kind of want to talk about it is Septic Flesh. Like I hear a lot of kind of Septic Flesh elements in it. And then there's two bands that you may or may not know. They're kind of more underground, but Floridity and Soulfold. Like those are two bands that I really kind of feel like I hear a lot of. And then there's kind of one band left of center, and this is more kind of the interlude sides that you guys do. So the shorter tracks in between. It's a band called The Rachels. They were on Touch and Go. And they kind of do what I call as orchestral rock is the best way I can explain it. They have, cool. So they literally have a cello player, a violin player, a drummer, a bass player, a vocalist, and then like a piano player. They don't have any guitars whatsoever, but it kind of occasionally they put guitars in, but they don't have like a dedicated guitar player. But they kind of like remind me of that. Are the bands that I'm kind of talking about influences or things that, you know, brought you there? Obviously, I'm probably not crazy with the Atheist thing, but I'm just saying, like, other than that. And if not, what bands actually brought you into these kind of influences?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like a lot of the earlier progressive stuff that you mentioned, Atheist, Cynic, those type bands. For me personally, like one of my all-time favorite bands is Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, if you're familiar with them at all.
Oh yeah.
Anything that Nils is involved with, honestly, is fantastic. I just love how they kind of meld this like very weird Frank Zappa-esque rock, but it's just like very like angry and like just like even more, I don't want to say more tonally odd, but timbrally, I guess, just like more extreme than some of the stuff that you might hear on a Zappa record. Just like, and has like this new music, like chamber sort of feeling to it. And that's definitely something that I wanted to bring into the Fleshvessel sound, was just like, instead of doing like what you would normally hear in like symphonic metal, do it more like you're listening to like a chamber orchestra performance instead of like a very small group of musicians, rather than like a giant grand orchestra that you hear in a lot of symphonic metal.
Anything, Gwen? You want to say anything at all?
Nope.
All right, cool. So the next thing I'm going to kind of talk about is what I hear musically when it's being played. And this is kind of how I explain your band to folks before I play it, because it is kind of a shock to the senses in the respect of it doesn't really start out death metal. It kind of becomes death metal as it goes along. And I'm like, all right, with an open mind, sit here and think about like some kind of bizarro art house sci-fi movie that becomes like this roller coaster of chaos, and it breaches on metal, but then it pulls itself back, and then it becomes kind of this weird avant-garde band again. So when we're creating the Yearning record, did you guys think of it more of a soundtrack, or were you writing individual songs? Like, what was the vision on making this record?
It was sort of like, I don't think we really went into it with a specific like vision of how it was going to be. We did have like specific songs, like kind of all going simultaneously as far as like writing. We didn't like write one after another. I kind of grouped them, I guess, based on just like their overall vibe of the song. Like, okay, this riff is going to go with this song, because they're sort of like pieced together like almost like a musical exquisite corpse type situation. That's kind of how the writing goes. So like Sakta will like initiate a song or something. He'll send me an idea, and then I'll kind of write a guitar part with that idea, and then like maybe add something onto it and then send it back to him, and then he'll add something, and then we'll send it to Gwyn, and he'll write like, you know, if I'm like do some crazy like improvisational stuff over this part, and then he'll like throw some flute stuff on there, and then it just kind of goes all between members, and it's all pieced together into like a long chain. And then we'll kind of reuse motifs here and there where we find appropriate. As you can hear, like kind of like the winter motif kind of comes up in a few different places throughout the record.
Sure.
Yep. For the flute, it was a lot based on vibes because
Yeah.
most of my stuff was recorded after at least some guitar or bass was recorded. So I tried to blend in with that. And for the improv parts too, it was just riffing on the instruments that were already there and kind of getting some little bits of things to throw in there that's interesting.
Cool. So Gwyn, this is going to be kind of towards you first of all, and then Alex, you can kind of throw off your thoughts on it. But I love the way you kind of flipped the musical landscape. So normally bands like this, like the drums and the guitars are the chaos. They're not like they're the parts that cause the really interesting, unique, weird. I feel like the guitar and the drums kind of are the gel that hold everything together in the band. So the woodwind, the strings, the non-metal instruments are where the madness and chaos really like come out in the best way possible. I'm also going to say the bass is just beyond insane at times. Like I'm not sure a human being's actually playing it. Like you know, but like there's at times that you have the most heavy metal flute that I've ever heard in my life. And I don't know how else to explain it. Then it's like just this side of distorted where I almost feel like there's like a psychosis happening while you're playing playing the flute. So talk to me how you got those sounds to happen in a band that's already kind of chaotic and madness to begin with.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was helped in college. We learned about all of these extended techniques for various instruments in composition classes, like multiphonics for saxophone. And part of that is also helped with I listened to Jethro Tull growing up, so that Ian Anderson flute part, even though I can't flutter tongue because I can't roll my R's, I can sort of get like a growling roll at the back of my throat. And I also just a couple projects in college was running my flute through my amp and a distortion pedal and just riffing that.
Cool. And Alex, like talk to me on how you hold so much control on the guitar when everything else is kind of going everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just kind of like how you're arranging the other instruments around it or whatever. Like if you have a lot of like kind of melodies going on, like for instance, the like sort of long epic section in Eyes or whatever that comes right before like the ambient bit, there's like three sort of melodies all happening at the same time. There's like the piano part, the bass is kind of playing a counter melody, and then the high pitched troll picking melody. So there's sort of like three things, but like you said, the glue that kind of holds it together is like the basic harmony that's going on in the background that the guitar is doing, just like those two chords or whatever. So it's just like how you're arranging things around it, I guess.
Cool. And was there a reason that you decided to drum program it rather than have like a live drummer on the record? Because I think it works really well. Like you controlled the drumming to such like that's what I'm saying. Like that's the glue. Like you can feel it. Like was there a reason you went that direction?
Yeah, we were originally going to have a live drummer, and we did actually do some recording sessions with a live drummer, but it was recorded like the album was recorded in like the height of the pandemic during 2020, so everything was locked down. It was really hard to get like a studio session booked at the time. And so we tried to just do it like DIY in a practice space or whatever. And I'm personally just like not a very good engineer. And I was laid off at the time, so I didn't have money to like hire somebody to mix it and all that stuff. So it was just like a circumstances. I was just like, we're just gonna go with the drum program again on this one, like on the EP, just because I just didn't have the money to hire a drummer and to hire an engineer to mix it and stuff like that. Just budgetary restraints essentially.
Absolutely fair. Best answer possible. Use what you have and make it as good as it is. I completely understand. All right. So I know probably a lot of people don't hear it, but I caught you guys. And all right, on a stain. Okay, you have power metal influences, my friend, and I'm not.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm not gonna not talk about this for a second because I am a huge power metal fan. All right, like Blind Guardian, Iced Earth, like things like that. Like,
yes.
And I can hear the Blind Guardian riffs ripping through that song. Okay, so talk to me about how did you sneak in? Like, and it's not always there. Like, it's very minimally there, but when you hear it, you hear it. Talk about how you got to throw like little nuances on other things that you like into these songs and still make it work.
I don't know. I think like making it work or whatever is like it comes at like a subconscious sort of level or whatever. Like I don't think about exactly like, okay, this is going to be like a power metal section or whatever, and then this is how we're going to transition into it. I think it's just like all sort of works out that way because everybody within the band has so many different like musical influences. Like everybody listens to all sorts of music within this band. We're not just like metalheads or whatever. Yeah. And I wouldn't even necessarily say that this is specifically a metal record or a record for metalheads or whatever. Troll plays it, his main sort of project is Silent Temple, and they're like a prog folk jazz fusion sort of group, and that's mainly what he does is that sort of stuff. And I love 70s prog, and I think as this project sort of evolved, I was like, what if a death metal band kind of was also a 70s prog rock jam band? Like that's kind of where I wanted to take it, because with a lot of progressive metal or progressive death metal in particular, I guess, you have these complex song structures and complex technique and all that sort of thing. But I feel like a lot of the outside influences are sort of limited to like jazz and maybe some aspects of progressive rock, but you don't necessarily hear like a lot of the stuff like the more weird side of what King Crimson did in like death metal, in progressive death metal,
Sure. So you kind of jumped the gun a little bit because there was a question I'm going to ask. So I'm just going to follow it up with this, which is great for me. So I was going to say, are you guys influenced by bands like early Genesis and Gentle Giant and like, Jethro Tull and stuff? And you already talked about, because you can hear it. And I agree. Calling you a metal band is kind of a travesty, but sometimes you need to package it in a way that people that listen to that style of music will give you a chance and listen to you and then be like, oh wow, what's this other stuff? And then you can play them other music and say, hey, you know what? You're missing this whole world of music by just boxing yourself in. But when you're adding the prog elements, talking about the band like Genesis, Gentle Giant, I'd even say there's some Camel moments in it in my opinion, like especially the way Camel kind of does the ethno elements in prog, like where a lot of other bands don't. When you're adding the prog element, is there a place, and this is for both of you, is there a place where it becomes too much and then you got to tone it back down, or is it something that you're always just like, if it works, it works, we don't care?
I think we're kind of on the side of if it works, then we're gonna go with it. Yeah. I think you might agree with that. Like there are definitely ideas that we put in there that I thought about doing, or that maybe Saka thought about doing, where we're like, okay, let's try something different. But if it makes sense kind of sonically, then we're not going to limit ourselves to anything. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, on that, like, it's really sort of vibe based. Like on the
Yeah.
slower songs, obviously you want it to be like slower and lighter and sort of like creeping up vibes.
Cool. So I want to talk about the vocals, even though the vocalist is not here right now. I want to talk about the vocals for a second. There are some really unusual vocal moments that go on here. I wouldn't even call them death metal. I'd almost call them experimental in the ways that they're done. Yeah, I mean, you get your death growls and you get the more guttural things at points in times, but there's these spoken word moments almost that are just like, they're not haunting, they're terrifying. Like you're just really not sure what the hell is going on. And like, you know, did another record just come on at this point in time kind of vibe? Like where like I had to check a couple of times to say like, because the first time I listened to the record, and I do this with every record, is it's like midnight, I'm going to bed, I put headphones on and I just listen as I'm kind of dozing off because I like to see what kind of dreams I get from whatever avant-garde band I'm listening to. Literally, there's at points in times where I'm like, I had to look over and make sure that Fleshvessel was still playing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so could you kind of talk about the layers and the different vocal styles and how that all came to be?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know a little bit about what Troll was doing on the record. I believe when he started at Columbia, he was actually a vocal performance major and then then switched over to composition. Um, but yeah, he has a background in like jazz vocals and operatic style vocals. So when he included those, I was like, yeah, let's just go for it. Um, and yeah, he just has like this very good knack for theater and so the spoken word style vocals I think were a good touch as well. I mean mainly his goal was to just match whatever was going on within the music and sort of complement that. And like if there's I think one of my favorite vocal sort of sections on the album is again like during that epic part on Eyes, and he like has these like tortured sort of just like fading out uh screams. They're not necessarily like death metal vocals. It sounds like he's like screaming. So it's just about matching, or that's maybe even like contrasting whenever the music calls for what is happening musically. That's how I feel.
And then, Gwen, it almost sounds like you play off the vocals as far as like the flute parts and things along those lines, the piccolo parts and stuff like that. Were the vocals done before you put your parts on, or is that just kind of a happy coincidence?
I think I think on most of the parts the vocals were done after, and I think there might have been a couple tracks where the vocals were done before, but I
Yeah.
can barely remember recording it.
Yeah, it was. I think the recording process was a little bit all mixed up, just because we're all living in like so many different places. Like Sakto lives in Thailand on the other side of the world, so there's always like maybe like a 24-hour delay sometimes, before you hear back if you send him like a part or something. And just with everybody's schedules being different, time differences, the overall production of the record was a little bit of a mess, I guess. The writing was really quick and easy, but like the actual recording process and everything else, like the logistics of getting the artwork made and released and everything, it took 3 years from 2020, from when the record was actually done recorded to now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Was it more pandemic based, the reason why it took so long, or because people were spread across the world trying to work on this? So
Yeah, sort of both of those things. I think everybody in the band probably got sick with COVID at least once.
Makes
And then
sense.
our artist, Carlos, also got sick. And there were some other issues with just the production of the artwork. Like he had never done anything of this scale before in this detail. So there were just like some learning curves in like getting it completed.
Cool. So I'm going to talk about my favorite song on the record, and I would love feedback from the both of you because to me, it's the first song I play for everyone because again, to my ears, it has everything that Fleshvessel is as far as a band, and it's the easiest way to kind of explain you guys first and then have them listen to the whole record.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's the Void Chamber. And the reason why I say that is it literally has jazz, it has neoclassical, it has death metal, it has prog. It has a groove to it that the other songs, in my opinion, don't have the same kind of vibe. And it's not manic. It's almost like, and we'll talk a little bit about the theme of the record in a bit, but it almost feels like that song itself is the theme of the record tied all together in a bow. So if you both could kind of explain, and I know it's been a while, but like how that song came about and when you heard it for the first time, what were your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so I'd say that's probably the most collaborative song on the record as far as who was all involved in writing it. I mean, Sakta probably arranged and came up with like those main riffs of it. So he was kind of involved a lot in the direction of the piece, but um, everybody kind of brought in their own thing onto that one. Like for example, the solo, like the long solo section, the jazz kind of part or whatever. Um, I basically just wrote like the background parts, the guitar parts, and I put my viola solo in there or whatever, and then sent those to Gwyn and to Troll, and was like, put like a solo over these parts. And so originally that like long keyboard section that's sort of like this ELP, like hoedown, bluegrass, weird sort of thing was just my guitar, just doing those open chords or whatever, and Amos brought that sort of feeling that you have in the song now to it. And the other section that Gwyn did a solo on that same song, the like flute part that he does over the trumpet part that Michael did, both of those things kind of together brought in like a weird sort of jazz thing to where like it was originally just like these sort of ambiguous guitar chords. So yeah, it was definitely everybody kind of coming together on that one, which makes it so varied, I'd say.
Yeah, and I was just looking at my Google Drive of it to kind of refresh my memory, and most of the songs have like at least two versions, one recorded in 2020 and then another recorded in 2021. So there
Yeah.
was a lot of collaboration between all of us in the different versions and everything like that.
Cool. No, awesome. So VoidHanger. They have been a very interesting label to me for years. I've gotten close enough with label head where I've even talked about maybe working with him because I'm a musician as well too, and he's liked some of my stuff, and the time frames have never allowed it. But I want to ask, how did you get in touch and actually work with this label? Because mysterious is a good word for this label. Like,
Yeah.
they'll be super active and then they'll disappear for months, and then they'll be super active again and they'll disappear for months. How did they hear you, and what made you want to sign with them?
Yeah, so it was kind of just like a coincidence. I on Facebook just added Luciano as a friend or whatever, and it was around the time when I had first released the when we first released the Bile of Man Reborn EP, and I posted it one day, and he just messaged me on Facebook and was like, "Hey, I really like what you guys are doing. would you be interested in putting out a full length, and we'll re-release the EP as well. And I had been approached by labels previously. Like, I had a project before this called Clavicus Vile, and it was just sort of a more straightforward like tech death thing. And I had labels approach me, but there was always just like some stipulations that I didn't necessarily agree with or whatever. But I mean, with VoidHanger, it was just like cut and dry. You know, it was like, if you write music, we'll help promote it for you, and help with production of like physical media for you. And all you have to do is write music. And I'm like, I'm down with that. I can write music.
Very cool.
So I mean, for me, it's not necessarily about trying to make like tons and tons of money or anything like that. It's just I want to see my art get out there to people who are gonna dig it and just do it because it's something that I like doing.
Working with friends is always the best possible way. I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I'm signed to a label in the UK called Aesthetic Death, and the owner and I, Stu, we started as friends. And literally he was like, I've watched you put out all this music for years. Why the hell am I not releasing anything for you? And I was like, cool, let's do it. So I feel the same kind of kinship, and that's kind of the vibe I got with VoidHanger. They just put out stuff they love. It's not about the money. It's not about the fame. It's about, did it put an earworm in me and make me like wanna get this out to the world? So that's very cool.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely the feeling I get from talking with them as well.
Cool. So let's talk about the theme of the record. And now I may be way off base, so the two of you can kind of tell me if I am or I'm not. But it almost feels like this end of humanity sci-fi kind of story. And I like, just from listening to the lyrics, listening to the way the music presented, is it fair to say, like, if Voivod was a death metal band, like, it might be pretty close to what you're doing? Just looking at the artwork, listening to the lyrical content. Both of you can kind of speak up to that if you want to. So,
yeah, I'd say that it's pretty close. I feel like it's a little bit more. I don't know. I don't want to say optimistic because the lyrics are very dark and like sort of not pleasant, but
yeah.
Towards the end of the record, I feel like there is this like, and I wanted to do the same thing on Bile of Man Reborn, where it's like there's this feeling that, things can be better if we want them to. But overall, the album is more tied together by like themes rather than like an actual concept album that tells a story or whatever. But yeah, it's just sort of like, I guess, a critique on, where humanity has taken itself and like how we struggle against ourselves, to try and create this better world. And there's like so much like, I guess, violence happening at all times, even though there are people in the world that want to make this a better place to be in,
Yeah.
And each song kind of like analyzes that basic theme through like different like contexts. Like Winter Came Early is sort of like basically about POWs being killed off in wartime. And that's kind of like that cyclical nature of wanting to get revenge. And A Stain is like about class warfare or class struggle. Void Chamber is kind of just about personal mental struggle with the world at large. And I feel like Eyes is sort of just like a culmination of like, if you don't, if none of these things change, then the world is just going to continue to decay, essentially. But there is, you can do it, essentially, is kind of like the end note. It's within the realm of possibility.
Gwyn, anything you want to add on to it?
Yeah, no, Alex got it.
Cool. So the reason why I was saying that is, to me, when I listen to it, and maybe this is just really good storytelling, it's kind of in the third person perspective. I almost feel like it's somebody that's not on Earth watching this all happen, and then
Mhm.
them telling like humanity's struggles and stories, and at the end leaving it as we think they have potential, but we're scared to kind of go and wait and see. Like, they still need to progress more, but there is hopes and opportunities. So
Yeah, that's totally. I would definitely agree with that kind of take on it for sure.
cool. Looks like Troll's trying to show up. I don't know if they're there or not. So
I am. Can you hear me?
yes, I can.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. All right. Sweet. Sorry, I'm
Cool.
late.
Nah, it's all good.
Okay.
So, Troll, I can ask you a question because you're here now, which is great. So we were talking about the vocals a few minutes ago, Alex, Gwen, and I. I kind of said that like you have the most unique vocal style for this kind of music, where the spoken word, the death metal, the proggy side, it almost feels like terrifying and a psychosis more than just being vocal lines. When you were writing the record, were you trying to get those kind of emotions and feelings throughout the record, or was it just the music that gave you that kind of vibe?
Oh, definitely both. I mean, I feel like generally the genre of like death metal or like extreme metal is like, I mean, that's what that like sounds like and feels like to me, is like terrifying psychosis, like or like, it's like a way to process like like extreme like just extreme fucking craziness.
Yeah.
That you can't necessarily like process or express in other situations, at least not like in a healthy way or like a way where other people won't be like trying to put you in a ward or something. And yeah, so I definitely wrote them just to the music, but also like at the time I was that was like shortly after I had spent like a year and a half of it, like every day in the streets, like being like fucking shot at by cops and fucking like doing all that kind of crazy shit, just like being out late and being at war sort of. So it's just a super fucking intense time, and I just translated a lot of that. It's like pain and anguish into this to these lyrics, because I mean, because kind of what a lot of it seemed to be about. Like the lyrics that Alex sent me started off as, it's like the first song is like about like a hanging scene basically, and then like a stain is about like the ruling class or whatever basically. So like there's a lot of just like really dark fucking demonic subject matter that I had to work with. So it was all like, yeah, it was all pretty fucking intense, but I really love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, very cool. So that can tie into the next question I was going to kind of ask. I hear some black metal elements, not a ton, but I hear some black and it's more in the vocal textures and kind of in the way that like cascadic black metal or post black metal brings it in, where it's more about the dissonance of tones. Did you kind of all have a fondness for that kind of more experimental post black metal or cascadic black metal, like Wolves in the Throne Room, or like Damon's Guard or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I personally dig a lot of those bands. I don't know if it was necessarily something that Troll was having in mind when recording those parts. I don't. You could probably speak to that.
Right. I have not really listened to a whole lot of Cascadian black metal. I think most of it that I ever listened to was played for me by Nathan from Ike Theater, because he's super into that. But I think it more came from like, I guess, Moon Sorrow. I've listened to a lot of Moon Sorrow, and I really love Vila Sorvali's vocals. He's probably my favorite black metal vocalist.
Cool.
Yeah.
So there's one band that kind of I keep going back to over and over again. It's none of the ones we've talked about already, Alex or Gwen. It's like And Troll, it has a lot to do with your vocals too. So I'm glad that you're here and I could ask these questions with all three
Sweet.
of you here. So there's a band called Mind Rot, and they're from California. And they kind of, the best way I can explain, they were on Relapse for a couple records, and every record is completely different. But I'm kind of talking about Forlorn, their first record, where they kind of mixed doom metal, prog, kind of avant-garde, and just soundscapes together. But there's this sorrow, but yet hopefulness in his vocals. And I feel like sometimes, Troll, you go into this gothy thing, and it's not like a bad goth thing, but it's like just the emotions on the way your vocals project, and then the music takes it back out into a different level. I don't know if you've ever heard the band Mind Rot, but if you have, or if you haven't, all of you should, because I think you would all be blown away by like the very first record. Like, it's one of the greatest things on Relapse that I ever heard that nobody gave a shit about, if you know what I mean. Like, it's kind of it's kind of one of those things. But like I said, can you kind of talk a little bit about like how those vocal changes, stylistic sounds, and kind of how those emotions came to be?
I mean, shit, that's a fucking really deep question. So I'll try not to spend like tell my whole life story or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I guess like, I mean, yeah, I mean, it really, I can kind of just continue from my last answer, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which is like, you know, like why, like what brings a person to like go out into the streets, and like there's no other option other than like running around in the streets, like screaming, fuck the police, and like, you know, just going totally nuts. You know, there's a lot of different people get there for a lot of different reasons, I guess. But like I've been doing that shit for like 8 years or something. In various situations, you know, it's just like once you learn of the nature of like the situation that you're living in, like, you know, it's on top of genocide and slavery, and like all the after effects of that shit are actually just like still being perpetuated. And like there's a whole society of people who, like, most of them are like very well trained, both by the society and by themselves, to like just turn a blind eye to that shit just to like get by with their day-to-day, you know, shit. So just like experiencing a reality where like there's these like super fucking extremely like violent and like nasty like underlying modes of the way like the culture and the world that you're living in is operating, and like the majority of people are just trying to ignore that. And like to me, with like not like, I don't know, to me that just is totally fucking like what do you say? I guess I experience like a dysphoria almost because of that, where it's like every day I just wake up into a reality that just doesn't make any fucking sense. I mean, there's like a lot of it that does, you know, it's like the world is so vast and varied in its expressions, but like that aspect I think is what causes and also I think my okay, can you ask what was the question?
Yeah, no problem. No, I just you have so many different emotional responses vocally. It goes from like goth to death metal to prog to like, you know, what brought all those different emotional vibes to it. That's basically what the question at the end of the day was. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess I love like many styles of music and many styles of singing, and Alex and Sakta have written music that's like so progressive and like varied, you know.
Cool.
So it's like I have so much to respond to, and like you know, I have all the like the pain and the craziness that I've been talking about to draw from, but then I also like have like all of the imaginations of of like the potential, like you know, all the beautiful aspects of this world as well that I just love so much. I just have a very wide range of emotions that I experience on a regular basis, so I'm just like can go all the fuck over the place, especially like when the music is like facilitative of that.
No, awesome. So Alex, on top of that, how, like, I'm sure after you heard the vocals and arranged, did you layer additional guitar tracks, or did you just kind of leave it the way it was? Because I almost feel like sometimes the vocals change the vibe of the music so very much.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, I think vocals were probably one of the last things to be added. So a lot of the other music was actually completed before those came on. I really didn't do much to Troll's vocals. I think there's like some reverb and maybe just like some compression or something on there. So a lot of what you're hearing is just how he sounds.
Nice. No, that's cool.
Uh, but yeah, I really just let Troll. I just sent him the music and it was like, you can arrange the vocals however you like, however you feel the music takes you, wherever you want to go with it. And then what you're hearing is pretty much what he sent back.
Very cool. So then there's just a couple more questions and then I'll wrap it up. But like I said, I want to kind of talk about the artwork tied into the album itself. So I look at the artwork and I think that's where I kind of get the sci-fi vibe from it more than anything. It's just when I look at it, it feels like there's a band from Sweden called Oxopogets, and they did an album called World in a World. And it's very similar to that, but yet different, like the way the artwork looks. And that's a giant kind of sci-fi, end of the world, gloom and doom kind of record. How do you feel the artwork plays into the theme of the album itself?
Yeah, so me and Carlos definitely had like pretty extensive conversations on how the artwork was going to look and like where we're going to take it. But it's sort of based off of a piece that I actually did in high school in like my graphic art class. It's just basically just like hands kind of reaching out of a hole in the ground, like grabbing these like little balls of light or whatever. But for the purposes of the record, I kind of wanted Carlos to take that idea into a more like sort of like body horror, but also kind of psychedelic sort of direction. Um, and it's just kind of supposed to represent like that struggle of humanity to kind of reach this like enlightened state, or like just to kind of like pull itself out of like the muck and like just create a world that is just like, you know, that works instead of having all of these things like hampering humanity like down. So it's just kind of supposed to represent that struggle and that kind of violence and fear that is just present, that is kind of caused by ourselves essentially.
Cool. So this is a question for all you. You can answer it however you want. Let's say the band today, right now as it is, goes back to the band in 2020 that started kind of this whole vision. How would you talk to them? How would you explain to them where it's going without changing tonality? Do you think that it would have progressed this way if it wasn't 3 years or 4 years between a record? Like, would 1 year of time make Fleshvessel very different than 3 years of time? I guess is what I'm asking. And if you went back and talked to yourselves in 2020, and they recorded this record in 2021, do you think it would be vastly different?
I don't know. I'd say that it probably wouldn't be too much different because I feel a lot of the recording, as far as like the structure of the songs and everything, got done probably by like winter of 2020. So that happened kind of fast. A lot of it was like when Luciano got sick from COVID, and then Carlos got sick from COVID, and things with the artwork that we discussed earlier. That's kind of mostly what set it back. It wasn't necessarily like the writing aspect of it, although that was like really contrived with everybody like living in different places. It still took longer than it normally would have with like a traditional sort of band setup, I think. But I don't think that the amount of time would have affected the way the record sounded. I think that it was a natural progression from where we started, especially with like wanting to bring in more experimental aspects onto the record compared to the EP. I think a lot of the like more extreme metal, death metal stuff kind of got pushed to the wayside. But yeah, I think that it's kind of a natural progression for us, and I'd say that to my 2020 self, I guess, just kind of let the music take you where it feels natural, and just do what you want to do, because that's kind of what this project is about, is like just making cool sounding music, and also being able to relate our frustrations with the world in a healthy manner, and all of those things.
The two of you have anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, so I think the recording aspect of it wouldn't be too much different. The main thing would probably be just more bands influencing the sound, because me personally, I just discovered Bloodywood like a year or two
Okay.
ago, and I just started listening to Dryad last week. So
Cool. Troll, anything you got? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think I recorded the parts. Man, I don't really remember. I think it was like early 2021 or something. But yeah, just how it would have been different. I guess I would not have been nearly as like strung out, having sung the like during the singing process. But I was totally in a fucking, like, I was in a state of grace at that time. So I probably wouldn't have been all the way there at that point. So that's probably to the record's benefit, I would say.
gotcha.
But yeah, I would just say to my earlier 2020 self, like, keep doing it, but don't, be safe. Holy shit.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. No, that makes sense. So the last question I'm going to have is kind of, if you were to play live, how would this band portray itself on stage versus the record? And I don't care who talks about it. You all can talk about it. So.
Man, I have thought about that. I don't know. I want it to definitely be like a very theatrical sort of experience. Like, I definitely want there to be full instrumentation, and we would have hired musicians. Like, I'd probably be on just guitar and quattro, so we'd probably hire a violist and hire a drummer and all of those things. The only thing that I'm just not sure who we would play with as far as like the bill, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that Sakta and I have talked about. He's been trying to get back into the United States in order to try and potentially make that happen. But yeah, if we did do a live show, I would want to go all the way with it.
Fuck yeah.
Any thoughts from the two of you?
yeah, no.
Oh, okay. I mean, I think I've thought about playing live a lot, because like I haven't played in a metal band for a long time, and I love like so many styles of music, so I've been doing a lot of other shit, but like I'm curious. It would definitely be easier to find a singer than it would to be find a keyboard player who can like play the kind of shit that I play. But and I probably couldn't really do both at the same, or I could do both at the same time, but I just would want to. I'd rather like commit to just one of them. That way I could like focus on it fully. That's what I think about, is just whether I'd be singing or playing keyboards, but it'd probably be playing keyboards, just based on how many great screaming vocalists there are versus how many great keyboardists there are who want to play fucking crazy death metal.
No, very cool. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for the three of you doing this. I will say that this record is one of my favorite records this year. That's why I wanted to talk to you. I'm kind of very selective on who I interview. I typically only do about 20 interviews a year from all the reviews that I do. So I want to just want to say, when I hear it, it inspires me to make music. And I think that's the most important thing, is when you hear music, it gives you an input creatively, whatever it is, artistically, writing, musically, whatever, in life in general. And you have done that with this record. The last thing I want to kind of say to you guys is, if you don't make another record, I think my heart will be broken. So just do not take another 3 years to give me a record, because if you do, I now know how to find you all, and I will talk to you and say, what the hell, guys? It's been 18 months. What's going on? But like I said, I just want to say thank you for that. And like I said, people should listen to this record. It's not a simple record. Again, like I said in the beginning, Troll, you weren't here, I think calling it a metal record is a travesty, because it's so much more. There's prog elements, there's, like I said, jazz, there's ragtime, there's neoclassical, there's so much going on that if you just listen to one song and go away, you're missing out on the whole picture so much. Sometimes the interludes intrigue me just as much as the actual full songs. That's really, that's just the way this kind of record is. So people should listen to it from beginning to end and multiple times like I have. But other than that, I just want to say thank you very much for doing this. It's been an honor. And when you make the next record, we'll talk about the next journey as well, too.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely, man. This is Clint from the Doorway 2, hanging out with the members of Fleshvessel. Until next time, guys, it was a blast, and I'm glad I got to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.